At 4:47 this morning, while most of Washington was still asleep, the American financial system crossed a line from which it may never return. The fourth major financial institution in 3 weeks didn't just close an account. They attempted to erase a human being from the economic map. What you are witnessing is not a series of isolated business decisions. It is not risk management. It is a synchronized, silent execution of a political opponent using the banking system as the hangman. I'm going to show you documents today that were never meant to see the light of day. I'm going to show you an internal timeline that proves coordination beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I am going to show you a legal memo from 2019 that predicted this exact nightmare scenario, a scenario where the boardrooms of Wall Street become the enforcement arm of the state, bypassing the Constitution, bypassing the courts, and bypassing the will of the people. If you have a bank account, if you have a business, if you have a political opinion that deviates even 1 degree from the approved corporate consensus, you need to listen to every word I'm about to say, because today it is a controversial political figure. Tomorrow it is the gun shop owner. The day after it is the religious organization. And next week it is you. Let's look at the anatomy of the hit. On January 3rd, 2025, J.P. Morgan Chase sent a termination letter. The language was cold, corporate, and precise. They cited a business relationship no longer aligning with institutional risk parameters. They gave a 30-day notice. On the surface, it looks like standard operating procedure. Banks fire clients all the time, right? Wrong. Here's the detail that the mainstream press is ignoring, either out of incompetence or complicity. The letter was dated January 3rd, but I have obtained records confirming that the board meeting where this decision was ratified took place on December 18th. Why does a 16-day gap matter? In the world of high finance litigation, 16 days is an eternity. Why sit on a risk decision for over 2 weeks? Because they weren't waiting for a risk assessment. They were waiting for a signal. They were waiting for cover. They were waiting for others to jump first. 5 days after the Chase letter, on January 8th, Bank of America moves. Same boilerplate language. Institutional risk parameters. But notice the escalation. Chase gave 30 days. Bank of America gave 14. The window is closing. The air is getting thinner. Then, on January 14th, the kill shot. Deutsche Bank. No letter. No grace period. Just a suspension. Wire transfers blocked in midair. Payroll for 470 employees. Regular working class people, janitors, secretaries, IT guys, frozen. $2.3 million in liquidity locked away with the push of a button. And finally, January 18th, Wells Fargo completes the circle, revoking access to safe deposit boxes. 4 banks, 15 days, 0 public explanation. The banks will tell you this is coincidence. They will tell you they all independently came to the same conclusion about reputational risk at the exact same time. I am telling you that is a lie, and I have the receipts to prove it. I am looking at an internal email dated December 15th, 2024. This was sent by a senior compliance officer at one of these Big Four institutions. To protect this whistleblower, we have redacted their name, but the content is explosive. The subject line reads, "Regarding coordinated approach to high-risk political exposure." Listen to the verbiage. This isn't banking talk. This is military strategy. Following discussion with peer institutions, recommend accelerated timeline for account terminations to avoid being last mover. Peer institutions. That is the smoking gun. In the world of antitrust law, competitors are not supposed to discuss pricing, and they are certainly not supposed to discuss the collective boycotting of a specific client. That is illegal. That is a conspiracy and restraint of trade under the Sherman Act. But it goes deeper than antitrust. This is about civil rights. December 18th. Remember that date? I told you to remember it. On December 18th, the board of directors at Chase met. On that exact same day, December 18th, the Risk Committee at Bank of America held a conference call. On December 19th, less than 24 hours later, Deutsche Bank held an executive session. 3 banks, same 24-hour window, same agenda item, same result. If you believe that is a coincidence, I have a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. This is what we call a hub and spoke conspiracy in legal terms. You don't need the banks to sign a contract in blood. You just need them to communicate, signal, and act in unison. And we have the signal. The signal didn't come from inside the banks. It came from Washington. Let's go back to November 2024, right after the election. A letter signed by 23 senators was sent to these major financial institutions. The subject was institutional responsibility to democracy. It sounds noble, doesn't it? But read between the lines. It was a threat. It was a warning that any bank continuing to do business with election deniers or threats to democratic norms would face severe regulatory headwinds. This is what creates the state action. In the United States, private companies are generally not bound by the First Amendment. Chase can ban you for your speech, theoretically, because they are a private company. But there is a massive exception to this rule, established by the Supreme Court in cases like Lugar versus Edmondson Oil and Norwood versus Harrison. The state action doctrine says that when the government coerces, encourages, or significantly entwines itself with a private company's decision to deprive someone of their rights, that private company effectively becomes the government. When a senator says, "Nice bank you have there, shame if the regulators looked at it closely," and the bank responds by firing a political client, that is not a private business decision. That is government censorship laundered through a corporate intermediary. It is outsourcing tyranny to the private sector because the government knows it cannot legally do it directly. We saw the blueprint for this a decade ago. It was called Operation Choke Point. From 2013 to 2017, the Department of Justice and the FDIC didn't ban payday lenders or gun manufacturers. That would have required legislation. Instead, they whispered in the ears of the banks. They labeled these industries high risk. They told the banks that processing payments for a gun shop might be reputational risk. The result? Banks, terrified of audits and fines, dropped these legal businesses by the thousands. Gun shops couldn't process credit cards. Short-term lenders couldn't make payroll. It was an extrajudicial assassination of industries the administration didn't like. It was illegal then, and it is illegal now. In 2017, a House investigation confirmed Operation Choke Point violated the law. But the architecture of Choke Point didn't disappear. It went dormant. It evolved. And now, in 2025, it has been reactivated, not against an industry, but against specific individuals. This is Choke Point 2.0, and it is far more dangerous. Let's talk about the specific victim here, because the risk argument falls apart the moment you look at the financials. The individual in question has a credit rating of AA-. That is better than most sovereign nations. Their debt-to-asset ratio actually improved in 2024. In 30 years of banking, they have zero history of default. Bank of America currently serves clients with felony fraud convictions. They serve clients under active SEC investigation. They serve defense contractors accused of war crimes. Yet this individual with a spotless financial record is the risk. When financial risk cannot explain the decision and coincidence cannot explain the timing, you are left with only one conclusion: the risk is political. And the political angle is undeniable. I have testimony filed yesterday, January 20th, 2025, with the House Judiciary Committee. It comes from a former compliance officer at one of these institutions. This is a sworn affidavit. If they are lying, they go to prison. They state, during the December 18th meeting, our chief legal officer stated explicitly, we need to move on this before the Senate hearing. If we are the only bank still serving him when they call us to testify, we will be crucified. There it is, crucified. Not by the market, not by the shareholders, by the Senate, by the government. They were told to draft a termination letter citing risk parameters, but were explicitly instructed by outside counsel not to mention politics. Why? Because mentioning politics creates a paper trail for a discrimination lawsuit. Citing vague risk creates a shield of business judgment. This outside counsel, by the way, the affidavit alleges this same law firm was advising multiple banks simultaneously on this specific issue. If true, that law firm is the conduit for the conspiracy. They are the hub in the hub and spoke. This isn't just about freezing an account. It's about freezing a life. Let's look at the human cost that the media ignores. On January 14th, when Deutsche Bank blocked those wires, 470 people didn't get paid. We are talking about regular people with mortgages, car payments, and kids in school. $2.3 million in payroll blocked. This isn't a glitch. This is a violation of federal labor law. You cannot withhold wages. But by freezing the accounts, the banks have forced this business into a state of involuntary illegality. They have made it impossible for the business to comply with the law. Contractors are walking off the job. Building leases are defaulting. Software licenses are being revoked. In the modern world, you cannot function without a bank account. You cannot pay taxes. The IRS requires electronic transfer for businesses of this size. Think about the irony. The banks have made it impossible for this entity to pay the government, while the government cheers on the banks. It is an economic death sentence without a trial. And that is the terrifying precedent. If the government wants to silence you, they are supposed to charge you with a crime. You get a lawyer, you get a jury, you get to face your accuser. Here, there is no charge. There is no judge. There is just a risk committee in a skyscraper in Manhattan deciding you no longer exist. And do not think for a second this stops with politicians. We are already seeing the slippery slope. In 2022, Canadian truckers protesting vaccine mandates had their personal bank accounts frozen, not by court order, but by government decree executed by private banks. In the UK, Nigel Farage was debanked by Coutts because his views did not align with their values. In 2023, PayPal fined users $12,500 for promoting misinformation before backtracking under pressure. In 2024, a Christian nonprofit was denied payment processing because their views on marriage were deemed hate speech by a corporate board. This is the social credit system. We looked at China with horror, watching them ban citizens from trains and planes for bad behavior. And while we were watching them, we built the exact same cage here, painted it red, white, and blue, and called it corporate social responsibility. The implications for the 2026 midterms and the future of the republic are catastrophic. If corporations can decide who gets to have a campaign fund, who gets to buy advertising, and who gets to pay their staff, then corporations control the outcome of elections before a single vote is cast. But there is a fight back beginning, and the next 72 hours are critical. Tomorrow, January 22nd, an emergency motion for a preliminary injunction will be heard in the Southern District of New York. The plaintiff is suing for immediate restoration of accounts. The legal standard here is irreparable harm. Usually, money damages are not considered irreparable because you can be paid back later. But the courts have ruled that the destruction of a business, the loss of First Amendment rights, and the inability to function politically are irreparable harms. You cannot pay someone back for a lost election. You cannot pay someone back for a destroyed reputation. If the judge grants this injunction, it is a massive signal that the court sees through the risk excuse. It forces the banks to turn the lights back on. If the judge denies it, we enter a dark period where this tactic is validated. Then, on January 24th, the banks must file their response to the lawsuit. This is where the rubber meets the road. They have to put their defense on paper. If they claim it was independent business judgment, they open themselves up to discovery. Discovery is the bank's worst nightmare. Discovery means subpoenas. Discovery means we get the emails, the texts, the WhatsApp messages between the CEOs. Discovery is how we found out about the
पढ़ पढ़ इल्म किताबां सबे ते तू नाम रखा लिया काजी फड़ तलवार दिलावर बनियो ते तू नाम रखा लिया गाजी मक्के जाके हज गुजारे ते तू नाम रखा लिया हाजी ओ बुल्ले शाह ਅਜੇ ਕੱਖ ਨਹੀਂ ਖੱਟਿਆ ਉਹ ਜੇ ਤੂੰ ਯਾਰ ਨੀ ਕੀਤਾ ਰਾਜ਼ੀ। ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ ਭਰੋਸਾ ਝੂਠੇ ਯਾਰ ਦਾ, ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ ਭਰੋਸਾ ਝੂਠੇ ਯਾਰ ਦਾ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦਗਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਪੁਕਾਰਦਾ। ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ ਯਾਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਝੂਠੇ ਪਿਆਰ ਦਾ, ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ ਯਾਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਝੂਠੇ ਪਿਆਰ ਦਾ। ਜੇ ਮੈਂ ਕੱਲਾ ਕੱਲਾ ਬੈਠੇ ਰਾਤ ਗੁਜ਼ਾਰਦਾ। ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ ਯਾਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਝੂਠੇ ਪਿਆਰ ਦਾ, ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ। ਹੋ ਮਰਜ਼ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਤੇਰਾ ਹੋਵੇ, ਦਵਾ ਤੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੇ। ਦਰਦ ਮਿਟ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਜੇ ਤੂੰ ਪੁੱਛੇ ਮੇਰਾ ਹਾਲ ਵੇ। ਹੋ ਮਰਜ਼ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਤੇਰਾ ਹੋਵੇ, ਦਵਾ ਤੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੇ। ਦਰਦ ਮਿਟ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਜੇ ਤੂੰ ਪੁੱਛੇ ਮੇਰਾ ਹਾਲ ਵੇ। ਇਸ਼ਕ ਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਮਿਰਜ਼ਾ ਹੋਇਆ, ਤੇਰਾ ਹੀ ਕਮਾਲ ਵੇ। ਫਿਕਰ ਤੇਰੀ ਮਿਰਜ਼ੇ ਨੂੰ ਬਸ ਤੇਰਾ ਹੀ ਖਿਆਲ ਵੇ। ਦਗਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਪੁਕਾਰਦਾ। ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ ਭਰੋਸਾ ਝੂਠੇ ਯਾਰ ਦਾ, ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ ਭਰੋਸਾ ਝੂਠੇ ਯਾਰ ਦਾ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦਗਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਪੁਕਾਰਦਾ। ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ, ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ, ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ।